Awesome update. So I'm delighted and honored to welcome our opening keynote speaker, FDA Deputy Commissioner Frank Yiannas. Mr. Frank Yiannas is the Deputy Commissioner for Food Policy and Response, a position he assumed in December of 2018. He is the Principal Advisor to the FDA Commissioner in the development and execution of food safety policies, as well as outbreak response, traceback investigations, product recall activities, and supply chain innovations. Frank came to FDA from leadership roles with two companies. You might have heard of them, Walmart and Walt Disney. As Walmart's Vice President for Food Safety, he led the effort to make Walmart the first U.S. retailer to require suppliers to achieve certification against one of the Global Food Safety Initiative benchmarked food safety schemes. He also pioneered the use of blockchain technology to create a more transparent and digital food system. I asked to introduce Frank because he is my role model. Not only is he brilliant, he's a world-renowned food safety rock star. He's the author of 2 books and a microbiologist, but I believe he has accomplished more in his 6 months on the job as FDA Deputy Commissioner than many others have accomplished in their entire tenure of government service. Please join me in welcoming Deputy Commissioner Frank Yiannas to the stage.
Thank you. Thank you, Kambiz. I wish you, I've got a performance checking coming up. I'd like for you to meet with the commissioner and tell him. Good morning. It's good to see each and every one of you, and it's a real pleasure for me to be here, and I mean that sincerely. And the reason being is because I'm passionate about 2 things. I'm passionate about food safety, and I'm passionate about new and emerging technologies. I always am chuckled when I get invited to one of these events. That's mainly, folks working in digital technologies and say, why do you invite a food guy to your events? But we have more in common than you think. How many of you eat food? Food is a part of everyone. She says she doesn't eat any food. Okay. Let me begin by telling you, I'm new to the agency. Spent 30 years in the private sector, so some of what you're going to hear this morning is a little bit about that transition and how perspective really matters when you think about these technologies and how they scale. But I spent the first 20 years of my career working at what I call the happiest place on earth. I then went to the busiest place on earth, and now I'm at the, you fill in the blank. I actually think it's one of the most prestigious regulatory agencies on earth and passionate about doing it. As you heard, in my last role, I spent a lot of time, 2 years, leading probably one of the biggest blockchain efforts related to food on the planet. And I'm going to share a little bit more about that. Now, Kambiz told me this is about the future. This is about digital technologies and what they mean. And obviously, I'm going to talk about applications to food. And I like to think of myself as a food safety futurist, but I think every good futurist has to be grounded on the past. And so I'm going to try to do a real quick overview on the history of food, just so that you know, and food processing and why you see these technologies are really important. I'll go pretty quickly. At the beginning of time, man, and I use the term man affectionately to refer to both genders, was mainly a hunter-gatherer, would go out and hunt food or gather food and say, here, eat this food quickly before it spoils. I don't think they were too concerned about E. coli or didn't have HACCP principles or weren't concerned about salmonella. 500 BC, humans said that food spoils fast, here let's salt it, and you have in the literature our first hints of early preservation techniques. Evidently, humans were eating salty food for a long time. 1845 AD, humans said, hey, that salt tastes bad, here let's place that food on ice, another form of preservation. 1850, humans said that ice melts fast, here place that food in a refrigerator. Now, they weren't the GE refrigerators that you and I have at home, but they were wooden structures with blocks of ice. 1864, humans said that food still spoils. Here, let's pasteurize it. The advancement of science with one of my heroes, Louis Pasteur. 1980, humans said that pasteurized food doesn't last long enough. Here, let's irradiate it, and the science takes a quantum leap. You can have chef-stable foods for 40 years if you want that. 1997, humans said that irradiated food is bad for you. Here, eat this all-natural fresh stuff. And at the turn of the century, humans are saying that all-natural fresh stuff goes bad. Here, eat this food quickly before it spoils. In food circles, this goes over really well because there's a lot of truth to this. It seems like we're just coming right back to where we started with the paleo diet, eat like your ancestors, minimally processed foods. And sometimes it causes food safety challenges. We've seen a resurgence in Americans wanting to drink milk, forgetting the lessons learned from pasteurization. We've seen moms thinking they're doing something good for their children by buying them unpasteurized juice, and unfortunately children dying because they think an unpasteurized juice product is a better product. So it's intended to be humorous, but there's a lot of truth to that. The reality is that today's modern food system is pretty magnificent. I read the headlines, people are pretty critical about today's food system, but if you pause to think about it, and you go into a grocery store, in the 1980s, a typical retail supercenter had about 15,000 foods. How many food items do you think a typical grocery store has today? Pretty close. Probably close today, about 75,000. And where are we going? The endless shelf. As a consumer, you being able to order anything you want from anywhere in the world at any time. This is the reality. And while on balance, that presents a lot of opportunities, a wide selection of different types of foods from all over the world for a fraction of your hard-earned dollar, it also presents some new risks. And those are risks that we're increasingly trying to manage. Here's a perfect example. Food system by and large safe. How many of you remember around Thanksgiving as you were sitting down to enjoy your Thanksgiving meal, what did you hear in the newspapers? Throw away your romaine lettuce is what I'm hearing. An outbreak, a nationwide outbreak of E. coli associated with romaine lettuce. As the investigators, FDA and CDC, were trying to investigate what was the source of the contamination, it takes a little bit of effort to do that. Not knowing where it came from, and in abundance of caution, they did exactly what you'd want them to do, is advise Americans don't eat romaine until we can sort this out. But basically, it wiped all romaine from all grocery store shelves, from all menus, in a couple of days. And at a time when consumers were sitting down to enjoy Thanksgiving holiday and celebrate around food, there was a serious mainstream food safety message. Now, the damage that does to consumer trust is hard to really fully measure. And while the food system is pretty safe, unfortunately, these incidents happen. One of the things it called for is the need for better traceability, and we put that in an outbreak investigation report. So a couple of months ago, being new to the agency, I, along with the new FDA Commissioner, Dr. Ned Sharpless, we put out a joint statement that we called a new era of smarter food safety. And let me just tell you that this is not a tagline and it's not a slogan. It really is a different way thinking about how we solve our food safety challenges that remain. And it was based on a couple of things. Number one is, as I just tried to persuade you, the food system is changing. In fact, if you see the investments being made, some people predict that the food system will change more in the next 8 years than it's changed in the past 20. And it'll be a good thing. But the food system is changing. We see gene-edited crops, we see plant-based foods, we see last mile changing. I could go on and on. The food system is changing at an accelerated rate. The second thing that is if you look around you in society, even this very conference, what are you talking about? Digital technologies and how they're reinventing and improving life all around us, whether it's the medical field, whether it's transportation, whether it's how you make reservations, how you shop. And we have to ask ourselves, can this digital revolution help improve food safety and public health? And the answer is clearly yes. And so smarter food safety for us isn't a tagline, but it's this idea that we will increasingly look at new technologies and new digital tools to try to solve our food safety challenges. And I like to say, if you look at some of the factors around that diagram there, is food safety must be, and any business improvement must be, people-led. It requires smart people like you, creativity, collaboration, insights. For us, it also has to be FSMA-based. FSMA stands for the Food Safety Modernization Act, the most sweeping reform to our nation's food laws in over 70 years, which passed in 2011. But it will be increasingly technology-enabled. So smarter food safety simply is people-led, FSMA-based, and technology-enabled. And let me give you an example of what we mean, because you say, okay, you're just talking about these technologies. How does this really come to life? And I'm going to give you an example using a technology that's on your agenda today, blockchain technology. I'm not going to give you an overview on distributed ledger, because I think you know how the technology works. But why blockchain? I like the opening comments that I've spent the past 2 years working on trying to create greater transparency in the food system for the world's largest retailer. Why did we choose blockchain? I can assure you we're not chasing blockchain technology just because it's cool, it's in the news, and it makes stock prices go up. But I do believe it's a good solution for the food system. This is why. I've been pursuing this holy grail of trying to create a digital food system and greater traceability and transparency. But how have I been doing it for the past 3 decades? Using centralized databases. If you think of the food system, is it a food chain, often described? You know, you try to get everybody in a centralized data system and it's linear in nature. No, the food system is very decentralized and distributed. And if you think about the food system, in fact, it's a decentralized and distributed food system with many different actors. And if you think about blockchain architecture in the food system, that's when you start saying, hey, maybe they match up. So let me show you how this looks. Did a pilot or a proof of concept with mangoes. So I want to tell you a little bit about what I call the life of a mango. Mangoes generally get grown in this hemisphere in Central and South America by very small farmers. Mango seedlings get planted. It takes anywhere from 7 to 8 years for those mango trees to mature and start bearing fruit. When it's bearing fruit and they're ripening, farmers will send out small farm crews to pick those mangoes. They'll send them to a packing house where they get washed, hot water treated and boxed. From there, they get packaged and sent across the U.S. Customs border, generally by air, land, or sea. Once in the U.S., they'll go to a warehouse, shipped to retailers across the country, then placed out on refrigeration. And you can see that package at the very end of sliced mangoes. I did this exercise at my prior employer. I took a package of sliced mangoes, literally brought it into one of my staff meetings, put it on the center of the conference room table, and I said, the traceback study starts right now. Tell me from where those mangoes came. How long do you think it took the world's largest retailer to do that? Weeks. 6 days, 18 hours, and 26 minutes. And why is that? Because the current paradigm is a paper-based paradigm of food traceability. It's called one step up, one step back. You look at any of those boxes, and you're supposed to have one step up and one step back traceability, largely paper-based. You can see if you're trying to chase this down on paper, it takes a long time to be able to tell where those products came from. To make a long story short, we started working with small farmers and a technology provider. I understand this session is technology neutral, to start digitizing that and capturing information on blockchain. We then did a demo. I was naive enough to do this in front of 23 media outlets at a Walmart shareholders meeting. Scanned a package of mangoes, and how quickly do you think we got the source? 2.2 seconds. Food traceability at the speed of thought. I am persuaded that distributed ledger technologies and technologies such as blockchain could do for food traceability what the internet did for communication. That's smarter food safety. What's the goal of that? It's not to just be able to say we can trace mangoes back to source in 2.2 seconds. Consumers want to know where their food comes from. It is to create a smarter food system and solve a lot of the challenges that remain in food. Food waste. We have to produce as much food between now and 2050 that's been produced in all of human history to feed 9, 10 billion people. Smarter supply chains might mean less food waste. Food safety, I just gave you an example. While the food system is pretty safe, there are still foodborne illnesses. How about food fraud? Do you know there's more organic food sold than is produced? How many of you buy organic? Nobody wants to raise their hand. So what we're after is more transparency in the food system. The reality, there's a lot of anonymity in the food system. And by creating this digital footprint, you can shine a light on all of the different stakeholders in the food system, create transparency. And is transparency a good thing? Yeah, it's a game changer. Let me close with this. About 8 months ago, I was giving a testimony in front of a congressional committee on blockchain. And I was asked, what do you think the government should do? At that time, I sat across the desk looking at, these congressional leaders, and I said, stay out of the way. Let's go fast. Don't slow it up. Let us innovate. I will tell you, 6 months into this role in the public sector, I wish I would have answered that question very differently. because there is a role for the public sector in blockchain solutions and helping them scale. And these are some of the challenges that we're working through right now at FDA, which is how does the public sector incentivize blockchain development and utilization? Creating transparency in the food system is a great thing for the private and public sector, but what is the public sector's role in that? Will these private, and I don't like the word private, but will enterprise blockchain solutions instill trust? Because one of the things we know is when these events happen, they cause a lack of confidence or trust in the food system. And if all the data in the food system is being kept on enterprise solutions, will consumers really trust it? Let me go back. What role do governments have in adopting standards and interoperability requirements? I believe if governments step up and say, these are the standards, the data attributes that have to be traced, it makes it easy for private solutions to scale and not have to create their own standards, and then we find that they're not interoperable. Because I don't think there'll be a blockchain ecosystem that dominates the world. And how do we speak up? That's a very strong voice that says, these solutions have to be interoperable. And will private or enterprise solutions be willing to share data with the public sector? They have to. Does the public sector have a role in the creation of these networks, and are they a node? These are all serious questions that we have to answer. We're grappling through them. They are early days in blockchain, but I hope that I've persuaded you, and I know from firsthand experience, it has to be public-private collaboration to develop these ecosystems. I'll close with this thought. I spent 30 years in the private sector, and I know there's a lot that the private sector can do to scale these solutions. I'm on the other side of the fence, and I know there's a lot, FDA and public agencies can do. But what's become crystal clear for me after these past 6 months is that there's so much more we can do by working together. And so thank you for listening. Thank you for organizing this session. Look forward to today's deliberation. Thank you.